Hello everyone, I am Swantje Martach. I recently defended my PhD in philosophy at the Autonomous University of Barcelona in collaboration with the University of the Arts London. Therein I elaborated a speculative, namely new materialist ontology of the clothing as a daily human thing relation. And if COVID did not put a spoke in my own among many other wheels, right now I would be doing a research stay at the Institute of Aesthetics of the University of Prešov in Slovakia. The bunch of aesthetic thoughts that are preparative for my postdoctoral research project and that I will share with you now are retitled "To See or Not to See? This is not the question." Within philosophical aesthetics today, it is usually worked on two strands of producing knowledge: the theory of art and the theory of beauty as perception. What interests me is the second strand, which I suspect to be an artificial conglomerate, based on the common modern equation of beauty and perception, which at the side is not an achievement of modernity alone, but was already held in antiquity, namely by the sophists and then by the Epicureans. This equation achieved to implement itself into common sense by means of a proverb, namely, beauty lies in the eye of the beholder. For reasons I will outline in a bit, it is my concern to re-disentangle beauty and perception, and to show that there are not two, but indeed three roads of thought aesthetic research can follow. What is prevailing today in the theory of beauty, hence, was what could be named a humanism, a locating of beauty within the human and her senses, especially her look onto the world. But when we read into the history of conceptualizing beauty, we can see that a humanist view was not always held. Indeed, for about 2000 years of theorizing beauty, namely from the 6th century before Christ until the Renaissance 16th century, a realist position prevailed, namely the Pythagorean notion that beauty results from perfect order, that beauty is an arrangement of parts. And only the last 500 years were ruled by a humanist understanding of beauty. This shows that what we today perceive as given, as unworthy to question, was held as wrong for a very long time. In the early Renaissance, Leon Battista Alberti still wrote, and here I cite, "But there are those who say that there are diverse views about beauty. This is a universal error committed by fools who assert that what they do not know does not exist." What hence is interesting to see for my project is what initiated the shift in the notions of beauty. Historians claim the arts, namely the Mannerist art of the 16th century. Beforehand, art was supposed to adhere to the canon and its rules, and its beauty was understood as resulting from perfectly measured proportions. Now, the individual manner or style was cherished as the cause of its beauty. This necessarily implies a shift in focus from worldly to human factors in beauty, and it could be claimed that this eventually led to an overestimation of the human contribution to beauty. Put differently, and here I speak up against historians such as Tatakiewicz, if a pluralism in styles is allowed, this necessarily produces the chance as well as the need to decide, and thus leads to a pluralism in preferences or judgments. So I do claim that an individualism in art leads to subjectivism in the aesthetic. It is here that the strength of especially the Kantian position, which admittedly was elaborated 2 centuries later, becomes evident. Kant defined beauty as a judgment. Hence, he equated beauty with judgment. According to Kant, when I say this is beautiful, this does not mean to say that the thing is beautiful, but only that my judgment of this thing is of a beautiful kind. What eventually is beautiful, hence, is not the thing judged as such, but the judgment itself. By this coup, Kant spared us the need to quarrel over our judgments, because he can simply say, "This is my beauty and this is yours," and all are equally true. The Kantian position hence was so successful as it seems to be able to account for the dynamism of beauty, while the same thing can appear beautiful to me and ugly to you. But the problem I have with this position is that it puts beauty in dependence to the human. It implies the impossibility of beauty apart from the human look. In this position, if nobody is there to perceive, then no beauty can arise. Or else, everything unjudged cannot be beautiful. In this conception, whenever I turn away from a flower as a thing classically appreciated for its beauty, this flower would A. either lose its beauty as soon as I turn away from it, a rather momentaneous depiction of beauty, or B. it would remain beautiful as long as somebody else comes by and judges it differently, a rather contingent notion of beauty, or C. this flower would remain beautiful until my own judgment of it changes, due to education or probably a simple shift in moods. This would be a highly individualist notion of beauty. This appears to me as merely a human hubris. We enjoy the idea that we will be the only ones who can create beauty, not only in the arts, but also more fundamentally in perception. But just because we like this idea does not mean to say that it needs to be true. On the other hand, by this conception, we shoulder us an overwhelming and I guess unmanageable workload by imposing on us the task to perceptively maintain by constant reappreciation all beauty in the world. I hence dare to doubt about the truth in the humanist notion of beauty prevailing today, and I seek to redraw the attention to and take seriously the ancient realism of beauty with the implications it contains. The primary implication that interests me is if beauty is not in the human but in the world, then apart from the beauty we see, there must also be instances of beauty existent that so far remained unseen, that slipped through our grid of attention. To clarify the distinction of seen versus unseen beauties I just made by means of an example, when I caress my dog, I witness the beauty of her shining and soft fur. But let us imagine that the door rings and I go to open the postman. And meanwhile I do all these alternative actions, in the realist notion I propose, her fur remains beautiful even though I do not see it. And it might even be that I get angry with her because she barks and thereby complicates the reception of my parcel, so that I refocus on her and now perceive her in a negative way, despite her fur remaining shiny and soft. So that also in this second instance, the beauty remains existent even though I do not experience it. This leads me to claim that to see or not to see is not the question determining neither the existence nor the amount of beauty. And let me add another remark. With the distinction of seen versus unseen beauty, I am not intending to propose a distinction of two kinds of beauty, such as the common natural versus artificial beauty, or Alza Hens and Vitello's medieval simple versus complex beauty. But the distinction I make is not one of kinds, but one of mere status, of situations. Theoretically, a beauty that so far remained unseen in my thinking can, in the very next instance, be seen. But practically, I claim that it is not only unrealistic, but even impossible that the human species will ever achieve to have captured all beauty existent. Such a realist notion entails the claim that beauty exists in abundance, as Alberti already wrote in the early Renaissance, or in excess, as Nick Land recently wrote, to us humans and our perceptive capacity. However, I directly wish to distance my own position here from the ancient concept of pankalia. I do not think that everything that exists is beautiful, probably because divinely made, but I only think that there are more things beautiful than we will ever be able to record. I hence argue that an attempt, such as mine, that seeks to prove a realist notion of beauty, should focus especially on, should even fetishize hitherto practically unseen and theoretically marginalized beauties. But here we confront a paradox. Is it not that whenever I detect a hitherto unseen beauty, in and by this precise move, it directly turns into a seen beauty? What is needed, I propose, is a method of detecting without disclosing unseen beauties, because disclosing means to entangle them within aesthetic perception. Disclosing does not allow to properly scrutinize such beauties, to witness them as they are, to research them according to their own nature. What thus is needed is a method that enables us to master the paradox of noticing unnoticed beauty while leaving it unnoticed, while reserving it in its unnoticedness. As such, I claim, can serve speculation. Speculation is an ancient philosophical method that was re-enlivened in the first half of the 20th century by such personages as Whitehead or Bergson, and it is gaining depth and power today by several philosophical schools, not only the one naming itself speculative realism. Instead of desperately attempting to pinpoint what resides in the corners of our eyes, speculation can be said to rather make this content or reality accessible by respectfully narrating it in its fleeting. As such, speculation allows us to do philosophy about what by means of logic alone would remain unseen, would even often be impossible to see. I thus suspect that speculating unseen beauties is able to preserve them, meanwhile allowing us to access them in their being unseen. For instance, even though I cannot see it, I can speculate the beauty of a flower that I just turned my back onto, the beauty in how it moves in the wind, or the beauty in its matching of its lila petals with its grayish stem. I hence agree with Baumgarten that the proper research discipline of the aesthetic, which etymologically stems from the Greek term aesthesis, meaning perception, is epistemology. But I claim that because beauty can materialize apart from perception, its theorizing must primarily take place in a distinct, namely an ontological manner. Readdressing the ancient question of the ontology of beauty, which was as well posed by Ingarden, even though the name-giver of this conference focused on a special kind of beauty, namely the one we can find in art, I ask, what is beauty? And the answer I find is that the ontology of beauty is not an epistemology, but that it rather is of an ontic kind. For beauty, this is to say that it is not a kind of perception, but rather a kind of existence. And for the human, this is to say that we are not the holder, but an accessor, not the obligatory and determinative, but only one among many and a merely possible factor of and within beauty. Thank you for your attention.